The headlines hit like a physical blow. Ford halts U.S. production. It was the kind of news that seemed unthinkable, a headline that would have been dismissed as fiction just months before. Yet, there it was, splashed across every major outlet, impossible to ignore. Trade war claims an American giant. The words echoed through living rooms and workplaces, a chilling reminder that even the most iconic names are not immune to global turmoil. Across the nation, screens lit up with the shocking news. Ford, the company that put America on wheels, was shutting its doors. For generations, Ford had been more than a brand. It was a symbol of American ingenuity and resilience. Silent factories, gates chained shut, workers clutching termination notices, images that felt like a tear in the fabric of the country. The sight of those empty halls and somber faces was a gut punch to communities that had built their lives around the hum of these plants. In Dearborn, Michigan, the heart of Ford country, the silence was deafening. Streets and communities built by Ford now stood still. The city's identity, so closely tied to the automaker, seemed to hang in the balance. The rhythmic clang of machinery was gone, replaced by worried whispers. How will we pay the mortgage? What about the kids' college fund? The uncertainty was palpable, spreading like a shadow over every conversation. The disruption was immediate, sending shockwaves far beyond the factory walls, touching every supplier, diner, and small business that depended on the plant. The ripple effect was swift, with local economies grinding to a halt almost overnight. For millions, this was personal. Third-generation auto workers spoke of loyalty and pride, now mixed with a sense of betrayal. Family histories, once a source of pride, now felt like a burden as uncertainty clouded the future. They'd weathered downturns before, but this felt different. A crisis born not from market forces but from political decisions in Washington. The sense of powerlessness was overwhelming, as workers realized their fate was being decided in distant corridors of power. The human cost was suddenly, painfully, in focus. Families gathered around kitchen tables, sorting through bills and wondering how they would make ends meet. The emotional toll was as real as the financial one. Initial reports were chaotic, filled with speculation and raw emotion. Newsrooms scrambled to keep up as rumors and facts blurred together in the rush to understand what had happened, and what might come next. Online, former President Trump's reaction ignited a firestorm, with supporters defending tariffs and critics blaming them for the shutdown. Social media became a battleground, with heated debates erupting in comment sections and timelines across the country. Trade war was no longer an abstract concept. It was the reason a factory worker in Ohio was cleaning out his locker. The consequences of policy decisions had become deeply personal, affecting livelihoods in ways that statistics could never fully capture. It was the reason a family in Kentucky faced an uncertain future. Dreams of college, retirement, and stability were suddenly thrown into question, replaced by anxiety and sleepless nights. The story was everywhere, a stark reminder of how interconnected our world is. From the largest cities to the smallest towns, everyone felt the impact, whether directly or through the stories of friends and neighbors. Decisions on trade policy now had profound, devastating consequences for real people, in real time. The debate was no longer theoretical, it was about jobs, families, and the future of entire communities. The shutdown wasn't just a business story, it was a national trauma. The American flag flying at half-mast outside the factory was a silent tribute to what had been lost. Ford's closure became a symbol of American industrial might brought to its knees. The empty parking lots and rusting machinery stood as monuments to a vanished era. The nation watched, stunned, as a pillar of its identity faltered. In union halls and public squares, people gathered not just to mourn, but to seek answers and hope for a path forward. The question on everyone's mind, what comes next? The uncertainty was heavy, pressing down on every conversation, every plan for tomorrow. The answer, for now, was silence. In that silence, a nation waited, hoping for a sign that this story was not the end, but the beginning of something new. Ford's official statement was blunt. There was no sugarcoating the reality anymore. U.S. production was no longer sustainable, and the company faced a crossroads it had hoped to avoid. The culprit? Tariffs on steel, aluminum, and imported auto parts had driven up costs across the board, squeezing margins to the breaking point. For months, Ford had warned of the looming threat, urging policymakers to reconsider. But now, the breaking point had arrived, and the consequences were impossible to ignore. Tariffs, originally designed to protect American industry and jobs, had backfired spectacularly, raising the cost of building a car in the U.S. to unsustainable levels and putting thousands of jobs at risk. Domestic supply simply couldn't keep up with demand, forcing Ford to pay steep tariffs on imported metals. Each vehicle now cost hundreds more to produce, eroding any competitive edge. And it wasn't just the big-ticket metals. Tariffs on thousands of smaller components from China and other countries compounded the crisis, making every step of production more expensive and unpredictable. Ford's global supply chain, once a finely tuned machine, was now choked by rising costs, customs delays, and logistical headaches. What used to take days now took weeks, if not longer. Absorbing these costs was impossible. Passing them on to consumers risked pricing Ford out of the market entirely. Shoppers balked at the new price tags, and sales plummeted. With no viable path forward, the only option left was drastic: halt production, shutter plants, and send workers home. Ford's leadership made it clear this was not a failure of the market or management but a direct result of government policy. The message was unmistakable. The tariffs, intended to bring jobs back to American soil, had instead become a barrier to doing business in America, leaving communities reeling and workers without paychecks. The paradox was clear: a policy meant to make America great again had silenced one of its most iconic voices. The national debate exploded, with citizens, experts, and politicians all asking, where do we go from here? The impact was targeted and devastating. The Dearborn truck plant, home of the F-150, was among the first to go dark, a signal of extreme distress. The Kentucky truck plant, assembling Super Duty pickups and SUVs, also shuttered, hit hard by metal tariffs. Suppliers who depended on these plants saw orders vanish overnight. The Chicago assembly plant, building the Explorer and Aviator, faced the same fate. Tariffs on electronics and components halted production. Even the iconic Mustang's Flat Rock plant fell silent. No corner of Ford's U.S. manufacturing was immune. The shutdown sent a clear message: the trade war's effects were brutal and far-reaching. From workhorse trucks to performance cars, every model was vulnerable. The heart of American manufacturing was under siege. For car buyers, the trade war suddenly hit home. Even before the shutdown, Ford prices were climbing, far outpacing inflation. A new F-150 cost thousands more than just a few years ago. Dealers struggled to explain price hikes to customers already feeling squeezed. The shutdown turned a problem into a crisis. New Ford vehicles vanished from lots, and prices soared. Supply dried up, demand spiked, and market adjustment fees pushed prices into luxury territory. Families needing a new car faced fewer choices and higher costs. Many turned to the used market, driving those prices up too. Affordable transportation became scarce. Tariffs, meant to help workers, now kept consumers from buying American-made cars. Brand loyalty eroded as buyers looked elsewhere. The sticker shock wasn't just a nuisance, it was a break in trust. Ford risked losing future customers, one dealership visit at a time. Ford's crisis was just the beginning. General Motors faced similar pressures. Tariffs added billions to costs, forcing layoffs and plant closures. Foreign automakers like Toyota and Honda, with U.S. plants, were hit just as hard. Steel and aluminum tariffs raised prices for everyone, making U.S.-built cars less competitive. The pain rippled through the supply chain. Parts suppliers lost orders, many faced bankruptcy. A single plant shutdown triggered failures across dozens of companies. Automakers froze investments, questioning the future of U.S. manufacturing. The tariffs, meant to encourage domestic growth, instead discouraged it. The entire industry was trapped between rising costs and global competition. It was a classic no-win situation. When a factory goes silent, Main Street suffers first. For every assembly line job, 7 or 8 local jobs depend on it. Diners, hardware stores, barbers, teachers. When paychecks stop, spending dries up and businesses close. In towns like Wayne, Michigan, the rhythm of life was set by the Ford plant. Now, despair hangs over the community. The local tax base collapses, threatening schools, roads, and emergency services. Families face foreclosure, dreams unraveling through no fault of their own. Single parents lose jobs at suppliers, unsure how to feed their kids. The stress ripples through families, straining relationships and mental health. As people move away, property values plummet, and the town hollows out. Young people see no future and leave. The shutdown isn't just economic, it's a social catastrophe. The scars may last for generations. The trade war was never one-sided. As the U.S. imposed tariffs, China retaliated, hitting American exports, especially cars. Ford's U.S.-built vehicles like the Lincoln Navigator and Mustang became prohibitively expensive in China. Sales collapsed overnight, wiping out a key revenue stream. Plants that relied on exports, like Flat Rock, faced idling. Ford had to choose sell at a loss or abandon the world's largest auto market. Meanwhile, European and Japanese rivals, untouched by tariffs, captured Ford's lost market share. The strategy of exporting American-made cars was dead on arrival. The global chessboard became a minefield. Ford's international ambitions were blocked by the very trade war meant to protect them. Facing crisis, Ford had to adapt, fast. Massive layoffs and cost-cutting swept through the company. Budgets for new vehicles were slashed and the mood turned grim. Ford doubled down on its most profitable segments: trucks, commercial vehicles, and SUVs, abandoning sedans. It was a risky bet, conceding ground to foreign competitors. The other pillar, a multi-billion-dollar push into electric vehicles like the Mustang Mach-E and F-150 Lightning. But developing EVs is expensive, and the supply chain for batteries is still tied to China. The pivot made Ford more vulnerable to gas price spikes and uncertain consumer demand for EVs. Cost-cutting risked hollowing out Ford's engineering talent. The company was walking a tightrope, reinventing itself while fighting for survival. Every decision was a high-stakes gamble. Ford's 120-year legacy hung in the balance. The future depended on bold moves and a bit of luck. Ford's shutdown leaves us at a crossroads, not just for the company itself, but for the entire American manufacturing landscape. The silence at these once bustling gates echoes far beyond Detroit, raising questions about the future of industry in the U.S. Can an iconic company, one that helped define American innovation, survive in this rapidly changing environment? Or will it become another casualty of shifting global tides? Ford's strengths are real, an unmatched brand legacy, the best-selling F-Series trucks, and a willingness to make bold, sometimes risky moves. These assets have carried Ford through tough times before, but the risks are huge. Dependence on a narrow product range, fierce competition from both established and emerging EV makers, and a recent erosion of brand loyalty that's hard to rebuild. The crisis at Ford raises a bigger question. Is large-scale U.S. manufacturing still viable in a globalized world, where supply chains stretch across continents and competition is relentless? Tariffs meant to protect American industry have instead exposed its vulnerabilities, making raw materials more expensive and supply chains more fragile. Can we truly reshore manufacturing without isolating the U.S. from global markets? Or do we need to completely rethink how we approach international trade and cooperation? The dream of a self-sufficient industrial America seems distant now, a memory from a different era when factories symbolized national strength and prosperity. As of September 16, 2025, Ford's assembly lines are silent. The future is unwritten, and the next chapter depends on choices made today. Will this moment be remembered as the breaking point for American manufacturing, or the start of a bold reinvention that redefines what's possible? The answer depends on policy decisions, technological innovation, and the willingness of consumers to embrace change and support American-made products. The story of Ford is the story of America itself, and its future, along with the fate of millions of workers, hangs in the balance at this pivotal moment. What do you think should happen next? The future of Ford, and perhaps the nation, may depend on the answer.